The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass orbiting the planet called Nexus Prime. Inside, 12 different alien species sat in a circle, each one representing their homeworlds and colonies. The chamber was built to hold thousands, and today every seat was filled. The air buzzed with worry and fear. Yuna stood at the human section, her hands folded in front of her dark blue diplomatic uniform. She was young for an ambassador, only 32 years old, with sharp eyes and black hair pulled back in a tight bun. Around her, the other species barely looked her way. To them, humans were the soft ones, the weak ones, the species that made beautiful art and wrote sad poetry, but couldn't fight worth a damn. The massive screens around the chamber showed the same terrible images over and over. Planets burning, cities crumbling, millions of lives ending in moments. The Vryn swarm had come from the edge of the galaxy like a plague of locusts. They consumed everything in their path, turning living beings into more of themselves. 17 star systems had fallen in just 6 months. "We must strike now!" roared Vector, the Council Prime. He was a Scarith, one of the big reptilian warriors that stood nearly 8 feet tall. His scales were dark green and scarred from old battles. When he spoke, his voice shook the chamber. "My people will lead the assault. Our armored legions have never known defeat." The Thrain representative clicked its mandibles together, a sound like knives scraping stone. The Thrain looked like giant insects with multiple arms and eyes that glowed purple. "Numbers will win this war. We can field 1 billion drones within a month. The swarm will drown in our forces." A being made of pure light energy, one of the Luminari, pulsed brightly. Its voice came from speakers built into the walls. "Primitive thinking. Our plasma cannons can sterilize a planet from orbit. Overwhelming firepower is the answer." The arguing went on for hours. Each species boasted about their military might. Each one claimed they should lead the attack. Yuna listened quietly, waiting for the right moment. She had studied every military engagement in galactic history, every tactical manual, every battle report. She knew humanity had something to offer. Finally, during a brief pause in the shouting, Yuna activated her microphone. "If I may speak..." Laughter erupted across the chamber. Not polite laughter, but the cruel kind that made her face burn with shame. Vector turned his massive head toward her, his yellow eyes full of contempt. "The human wishes to speak of war? Tell me, little human, how many battles has your species won against galactic-level threats?" He paused, his mouth curling into something like a smile. "Oh, that's right. You've never faced one. Your people are known for music and paintings, not warfare." More laughter. A few species didn't join in, but they didn't defend her either. Yuna kept her voice steady. "Earth can provide military support. We have experienced soldiers and..." "Soldiers?" Vector's laugh was like grinding rocks. "Your species has the physical strength of children. Your reflexes are slow. Your lifespans are pathetically short. You wage war against yourselves with projectile weapons while the rest of the galaxy mastered energy warfare millennia ago." He leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over her station. "This is not a debate club, human. This is survival. Return to your little blue planet and write poetry about our victory. This is work for warriors, not philosophers." The council voted. Humanity would have no role in the military response. They would be allowed to provide medical aid and supply logistics, nothing more. Yuna accepted the decision with a bow, her face neutral even as anger burned in her chest. Back in her small quarters on the station, Yuna sat at her desk and typed out an encrypted message. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard. The message would take 6 hours to reach Earth. Bouncing through relay stations and wrapped in military-grade encryption, she chose her words carefully. "Council refuses military aid. Humanity dismissed as combat ineffective. Vrin threat is real and growing. Recommend immediate action. Authorization requested for contingency plans. She sent the message and waited. On Earth, deep beneath the city of Seoul, a secure facility received the message. Admiral Jinwoo read it 3 times, his weathered face showing no emotion. He was in his late 50s, his black hair now streaked with gray. His hands bore scars from old burns, and his right leg was a prosthetic, lost in the resource wars 30 years ago. He called a meeting. Within an hour, 2 people sat across from him in the war room. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and tactical data. Colonel Hana arrived first. She looked like she could be someone's friendly aunt, with laugh lines around her eyes and a comfortable build. But those eyes were cold and calculating, and her left arm was entirely cybernetic, the metal painted to match her skin tone. She had served in special operations for 20 years, fighting in conflicts that officially never happened. Captain Doyen came next, younger at 42, thin and nervous-looking with quick movements. He had survived the Martian siege, trapped in a station for 8 months while supplies ran out and the enemy pounded their defenses. He knew more about void combat than anyone alive. Jinwoo laid Yuna's message on the table. They laughed at us. Hana's jaw tightened. Of course they did. They see us as we want to be seen, artists, dreamers, peacemakers. They don't know our history, Doyen added quietly. They don't know what we've done to each other. Jinwoo stood and walked to the largest screen. It showed Earth, peaceful and blue in the darkness. The 21st century almost destroyed us. We fought over water, over land, over ideologies. We nearly made ourselves extinct. Billions died in wars that lasted decades. He turned to face them. But we learned. Every horror taught us something. Every defeat made us sharper. We became very, very good at killing each other. And then we stopped, Hana said. And then we stopped, Jinwoo agreed. We grew up. We put away the weapons and built a better world. But we didn't forget how to use them. We didn't forget the lessons written in blood. Doyen pulled up files on his datapad. We have 5 ships ready. Retrofit colonies and mining vessels. Nothing fancy, but they're armed and crewed. Volunteers only, Jinwoo said firmly. Veterans who understand what we're asking. We'll have more volunteers than ships, Hana replied. A lot of old soldiers are bored with peacetime. Jinwoo made his decision. Activate Operation Ghostfall. Colonel, prep your ground teams. Captain, ready your fleet. Show them what human veterans really are. They stood and saluted. As they left, Jinwoo returned to staring at the image of Earth. The galaxy thought humans were weak. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in being peaceful. It was in choosing to be peaceful, despite knowing exactly how to wage war. He sent one message back to Yuna. Package delivered. Then he sent orders to 5 ships waiting in the darkness between stars. Move out. 3 weeks passed, and the Galactic Council's Great Armada still hadn't left port. The Scarith demanded the command position. The Thrain insisted their drones needed special transport. The Luminary required specific energy frequencies that the other ships couldn't provide. Every day brought new arguments, new delays, new demands for honor and recognition. Meanwhile, the Vrin swarm didn't wait. They hit Thrain 7, a colony world home to 6 billion insect-like beings. The attack lasted only 72 hours. When it was over, the planet was silent. Every living thing had been absorbed into the swarm, converted into more Vrin warriors. The images that came back showed cities filled with organic growth, buildings covered in pulsing flesh, and the sky dark with flying monsters. The council met again in emergency session. Yuna watched as the different species turned on each other. The Thrain accused the Scarith of moving too slowly. The Scarith blamed the Luminari for refusing to share weapon designs. Vector stood in the center of it all, his voice booming over the chaos, demanding order that wouldn't come. In a quiet moment, Yuna received a message on her private comm. Just 3 words. Package delivered. She allowed herself a small smile. The human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Thrain 7's largest moon. There were 5 vessels, and they looked nothing like proper warships. One had been a colony transport, its hull patched with mismatched metal plates. Another was an old mining ship, its drilling equipment replaced with missile launchers that looked homemade. The third was so old its design didn't match anything in current databases. They looked like junk, like someone had pulled them from a scrapyard and slapped guns on them. But their crews were anything but junk. Colonel Hana stood on the bridge of the ship called Incheon's Fury, watching the dead world rotate below. She was 53 years old, and every year showed in the lines on her face. Her cybernetic arm whirred softly as she gripped the railing. Behind her, 300 soldiers prepared for deployment. Not young recruits fresh from training, veterans, men and women in their 40s and 50s, bodies marked with old wounds and eyes that had seen too much. "How long since you fought, Sergeant?" Hana asked the woman standing next to her. Sergeant Yunji was the youngest of the group at 31. She had been a combat medic in the Pacific conflicts, the last major war before Earth achieved real peace. Her hands still shook sometimes, remembering the things she'd seen. 7 years, Colonel, but you don't forget." "No," Hana agreed. "You never forget." On the bridge of the Silent Promise, Captain Doyen reviewed tactical data with his senior officers. His ship had once mined asteroids for minerals. Now it coordinated the small fleet, its sensors upgraded with military hardware that technically wasn't supposed to exist. His bridge crew were all Navy veterans from the Belt Rebellions, when Earth's colonies fought for independence 30 years ago. "The Vryn are establishing a hive structure on the moon," his sensor operator reported. She was an older woman with gray hair, missing 3 fingers on her left hand from a decompression accident during the war. "Approximately 1 million individual units. They're using it as a staging ground for the next attack." Doyun studied the display. The other species would have sent their fleets directly at the hive, overwhelming it with firepower. That was their way. Direct, honorable, predictable. "We're not doing that," Doyen said quietly. "We're going to teach these things what human warfare really means. Comms, get me Colonel Hana." Hana's face appeared on the screen. "Captain." "Colonel, how do you fight an enemy with overwhelming numbers?" Hana smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "You don't fight them head-on. You make them fight themselves. You turn their strength into weakness. You be smarter, faster, and meaner than they expect." "Exactly. Begin insertion. Grid pattern delta. No unit larger than 20 soldiers." "Understood. Hana out." The transport pods launched from the Incheon's Fury, small stealth craft that barely registered on sensors. They scattered across the moon's surface like seeds in the wind, landing kilometers apart in the rocky terrain. The pods opened and humans emerged, moving quickly to dig into defensive positions. Sergeant Yunji led her 20-person team to a canyon entrance. They were combat engineers, specialists in making the battlefield itself into a weapon. While half the team set up sensors and communications, the other half placed explosive charges along the canyon walls. Not fancy military explosives. Mining charges, the same kind used to break up asteroids. Simple, reliable, devastating. "If we drop these rocks right," Yunji told her team, "we can channel them exactly where we want them to go. The Vryn will send scouts through here. We let the first group pass, blow the charges behind them, and trap them. Then we deal with them on our terms." Private Minho, a veteran who had fought in urban warfare for a decade, nodded. "Box them in and burn them out. Classic tactic." "Classic because it works," Yunji replied. Across the moon, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers didn't bunch together. They spread out, each team independent but coordinated. They didn't have fancy weapons. They had rifles that fired solid projectiles, grenades that worked on simple chemical reactions, and explosives made from mining equipment. But they had something else. They had experience. The Vryn swarm detected the human presence quickly. Their hive mind analyzed the intruders and dismissed them as a minor threat. Only 300 beings using primitive weapons. The swarm sent 10,000 warriors to eliminate them. Easy work. The Vryn warriors moved through the canyons in a massive wave, their chittering communication echoing off the rocks. They were fast, each one the size of a large dog, with razor-sharp claws and acidic blood. They had consumed 17 worlds. These few humans would be nothing. Then the canyon exploded. Yunji triggered the charges when exactly half the Vryn force was in the kill zone. Thousands of tons of rock collapsed on them, crushing hundreds instantly. The canyon behind them sealed off, trapping the survivors between walls of rubble and the human positions ahead. "Now!" Yunji shouted. Her team opened fire from prepared positions. They had set up crossing lanes of fire, supporting each other, making every shot count. When the Vryn tried to climb the canyon walls, they found them coated with slick chemicals that made them slide back down. When they tried to rush forward, they hit kill zones covered by multiple firing positions. In orbit, Captain Doyen watched the battle through satellite feeds. His ships didn't fire. They didn't need to. They just fed information to the ground teams, told them where Vryn reinforcements were coming from, and occasionally dropped supply pods. "The Vryn are adapting," his tactical officer reported. "They're sending flyers to bypass the canyons." "Alert all teams," Doyen ordered. "Switch to anti-air formation." The message went out instantly. Human teams shifted their positions, setting up weapons designed to target flying enemies. Simple surface-to-air missiles, the same design Earth had used 100 years ago. When the Vryn flyers came, they flew into a wall of fire. Colonel Hana watched from her command post as the battle unfolded. The Vryn kept adapting, kept changing their tactics, but humans changed faster. Every time the swarm learned something, the humans would do something completely different. "They're confused," her intelligence officer noted. "The hive mind doesn't understand why we won't fight predictably." "Because we learned not to," Hana replied. "Every human war taught us the same lesson. The side that adapts faster wins. The Vryn spent millions of years fighting the same way. We spent centuries fighting each other 1,000 different ways. 72 hours after the humans landed, the moon was theirs. 300 veterans had destroyed a Vryn nest of 1 million. They had lost 28 soldiers, and each loss hurt, but they had proven something. Humans knew how to fight. When the report reached the Galactic Council, no one spoke for a long time. Finally, Vector's voice broke the silence. "Impossible. 300 soldiers cannot defeat a 1,000,000-strong swarm. The data must be wrong." Yuna stood, her voice calm and clear. "The data is correct, Council Prime. Perhaps it's time you stopped underestimating humanity." The holographic display in the council chamber showed footage from the moon battle. Alien representatives watched in silence as human soldiers moved through smoke and fire. Their movements precise and coordinated. They watched Vryn warriors fall into traps. They watched explosions collapse entire sections of terrain. They watched 300 humans systematically take apart an enemy force that should have overwhelmed them in minutes. Yuna let the footage play without comment. Sometimes the best argument was simply showing the truth. A Thrain representative clicked its mandibles nervously. How did they know where to place their explosives? How did they predict our enemy's movements? They didn't predict, Yuna replied. They prepared for multiple scenarios. Every team had backup plans for their backup plans. When one approach failed, they switched to another, instantly, without waiting for orders from above. Vector leaned forward in his massive chair. His earlier arrogance had faded, replaced by something that might have been respect, or maybe just confusion. Your soldiers use ancient weapons, projectile firearms, chemical explosives, technology we abandoned millennia ago. Yes, Yuna agreed, because ancient doesn't mean ineffective. A rock dropped from the right height will kill just as dead as an energy weapon. My people learned to fight with whatever we had available. We fought wars when we couldn't afford better weapons, so we got very good at using simple ones. The luminary pulsed with light, its voice thoughtful. The Vryn adapt to whatever they face. They learn from every engagement. How did humans prevent this adaptation? Yuna smiled. By never fighting the same way twice. The Vryn need to observe a pattern to adapt to it. Human soldiers kept changing the pattern. Sometimes they fought in complete silence. Sometimes they used sound as a weapon. Sometimes they used fire. Sometimes chemicals. Sometimes they just collapsed the ground under the enemy's feet. The swarm couldn't adapt because there was nothing consistent to adapt to. She pulled up a new file. Colonel Hana sent me this report. In one engagement, her teams used agricultural fungus from Earth, simple plant matter, but it grows fast in the right conditions, and it apparently makes Vryn warriors very sick. The swarm had never encountered this before. By the time they adapted, humans had moved on to different tactics. The council chamber filled with murmuring conversations. Representatives talked among themselves in various languages, their tones ranging from impressed to worried. On the human ships near the moon, the veterans were already preparing for the next phase. Colonel Hana walked through the medical bay, visiting the wounded. 28 dead was a light casualty count by old war standards, but every loss still hurt. She stopped at each bed, speaking quietly with soldiers who would heal and fight again. Sergeant Yunji sat with Private Minho, changing the bandages on his arm. He had been caught by Vryn acid during the final push. The flesh burned down to muscle. He would recover, but it would take time and hurt like hell. We won, Minho said, trying to smile through the pain medication. We survived, Yunji corrected gently. That's what we do best. Hana moved to the observation deck where Captain Doyen waited. Through the windows, they could see the other 4 human ships hanging in the darkness. Beyond them, the moon they had just taken showed scars from the battle. The council wants to meet with you, Doyen said. Both of you. They want to understand how we did it. Good, Hana replied. Maybe they'll actually listen this time. They took a shuttle to the council station, arriving 12 hours later. The meeting was smaller this time, just the military commanders from each species. Vector was there, along with Thrain generals and luminary war minds. They sat around a table built for beings of very different sizes and shapes. Hana and Doyun stood at one end, looking small compared to the massive aliens around them, but they stood straight and confident. Explain your tactics, Vector demanded, though his tone was less harsh than before. We have studied the battle recordings, but we do not understand your decision-making process. Hana activated a holographic display, showing the moon's terrain. The Vryn operate as a hive mind. They process information centrally and distribute orders. That's their strength and their weakness. If you damage their communication nodes, the individual warriors become confused. So that's what we targeted first. She zoomed in on specific locations. My teams didn't fight to kill Vryn. We fought to cut their communications. Every attack was designed to isolate units from the hive mind. Once isolated, they're easy to destroy. A Thrain general leaned forward. But you had only 300 soldiers against 1 million enemies. How did you have enough forces to attack multiple targets? We didn't attack multiple targets, Doyen explained. We made them think we did. We used drones, false signals, sound generators, anything to create the impression of a larger force. The Vryn split their forces to respond to dozens of threats. Most of those threats didn't exist. Deception, Vector said slowly. You won through deception. We won through using every advantage we could find, Hana corrected. Deception, terrain, psychology. We studied how the Vryn think and attacked their decision-making process. This is how humans fight. We don't look for honorable combat. We look for ways to win with minimum casualties on our side. The room fell silent. For species that valued honor and direct combat, this was a difficult concept. Finally, a Luminari war mind spoke. Is this why your species stopped fighting yourselves? Did you become too good at it? Hana and Doyun exchanged glances. It was a perceptive question. Yes, Hana admitted. We learned to kill each other very efficiently. Nuclear weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. Biological weapons that killed millions. Chemical weapons that turned battlefields into poison zones. We got so good at warfare that continuing it meant extinction. So we stopped. We chose peace because we knew exactly what the alternative would cost. She stood straighter, her cybernetic arm catching the light. But we didn't forget the lessons. We teach military history not to glorify war, but to remember its cost. Every veteran like me carries those lessons. We know 1,000 ways to win a battle because we learned them by losing people we loved. Doyen pulled up more files. Earth can provide training to your forces. We can teach small unit tactics, asymmetric warfare, psychological operations, terrain usage, and adaptive command structures. But you need to understand something first. Human warfare isn't about glory. It's about making sure your soldiers come home alive. Vector stood, his massive form towering over the humans. He placed his clawed hand on the table, a gesture of respect in Scarith culture. We dismissed you as weak. We were wrong. What do you need from the Council? Recognition that human military command knows what they're doing, Hana replied. When we tell you to do something that seems strange or dishonorable, trust that we have a reason. We've been fighting wars since before we left our planet. We're really, really good at it. The Council representatives agreed. For the first time in galactic history, a species considered primitive would lead military operations. Back on Earth, Admiral Jinwoo received the news with mixed feelings. Humanity was being recognized as a military power. That was good for survival. But it also meant showing the galaxy the darkest parts of human history. The wars, the genocides, the centuries of violence that nearly destroyed them. He looked at the old photograph on his desk. Him as a young man, standing with his unit during the resource wars. 20 soldiers smiling at the camera. He was the only one still alive. We fought so hard to become better than this, he whispered to the empty room. And now we have to remember how to be monsters again. But he knew why it mattered. The galaxy needed humanity's darkness now, so maybe later they could all share in humanity's light. He sent the order. Operation Ghostfall Phase 2. Activate. The Vryn swarm had existed for millions of years. It had consumed thousands of worlds, absorbed billions of different life forms, and learned from every encounter. The swarm was not just alive, it was intelligent. And now it was paying attention to humanity. Deep in Vryn-controlled space, in the center of what had once been a beautiful star system, the swarm's central intelligence processed data. It had analyzed the defeat at the moon. It had studied human tactics, human weapons, and human behavior. The conclusion was clear. Humans were dangerous, not because they were strong or fast or naturally armored, but because they thought differently than any species the swarm had encountered. Other species fought to overwhelm or to dominate. Humans fought to survive, and that made them unpredictable. The swarm made a decision. 3 hive fleets, each containing 1 billion warriors, would move toward human space. Humanity would be eliminated before they could spread their tactics to other species. The Vryn would adapt to human warfare by consuming humans themselves, absorbing their knowledge and experience into the swarm. It would take the fleets 3 months to reach human territory. The swarm was patient. It had time. But the swarm didn't understand one critical thing about humans. When you threaten them directly, they don't run. They prepare. On the council station, alarms started blaring. Sensors had detected the Vryn movement. 3 massive fleets all heading toward Earth and its colonies. The numbers were staggering. 3 billion warriors, enough to consume dozens of worlds. The council went into immediate panic. Representatives shouted at each other, some demanding they abandon human space to save themselves, others arguing for immediate military response. The chamber descended into chaos. Ambassador Yuna stood calmly at her station, watching the display showing the approaching fleets. She activated her communicator, sending a message to Earth with only 2 words. "They're coming." Then she turned to the council, raising her voice to cut through the noise. "Members of the council, please. This is exactly what we planned for." The chamber quieted, all eyes turning to the small human woman. Vector's voice was grave. "Ambassador, 3 billion Vryn warriors are heading toward your worlds. Your 5 ships cannot stop this. Your 300 soldiers cannot fight this. Even with council support, we will be overwhelmed." Yuna smiled, and there was something cold in that smile, something that made even Vector pause. "Who said we only have 5 ships?" On Earth, hidden shipyards across the solar system came alive. These weren't new facilities. They had been there for decades, built during humanity's war-torn past and kept maintained just in case. Because humans, having nearly destroyed themselves, had learned to always have a backup plan. Ships began to move. Not 5, 30, not pretty, new warships built for galactic standards, but proven designs from humanity's bloody history. Carriers that could launch hundreds of small attack craft. Submarines designed for space, able to hide in asteroid fields and strike without warning. Destroyers, cruisers, and support vessels, all retrofitted with modern technology, but keeping their core human designs. And the crews. Oh, the crews. Admiral Jinwoo stood in the command center, watching the deployment. Around him, screens showed ships launching from Mars, from the asteroid belt, from orbital stations around Jupiter. Each ship crewed by veterans who had been living quiet civilian lives. Engineers who had fought in siege warfare. Pilots who had survived fleet battles. Tacticians who had won wars that history books barely mentioned. "How many volunteers do we have?" he asked. His aide checked the numbers. 30,000, sir. We had to turn away another 50,000. Not enough ships." Jinwoo nodded slowly. So many old soldiers, ready to fight one more time. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. Colonel Hana now commanded a division of 3,000 ground assault troops. They trained on a small moon, running drills that would have seemed insane to galactic military observers. Urban warfare in zero gravity, chemical weapons deployment, guerrilla tactics, siege breaking, counterinsurgency. Every hard lesson humanity had learned, being taught to a new generation. Well, not new. The youngest soldier in her division was 35. Most were in their 40s and 50s, veterans who knew that experience mattered more than youth. Captain Doyun commanded a fleet of 30 ships now, and he was training their crews in tactics the galaxy had never seen. Wolf pack hunting, where groups of ships would coordinate to isolate and destroy larger enemies. False retreat maneuvers. Ambush tactics using asteroid fields and planetary rings for cover. Naval warfare adapted from Earth's oceans, brought to the void of space. "The Vryn have overwhelming numbers," Doyen told his captains during a briefing. "So we don't fight them in a straight battle, we make them split up. We hit their supply lines, we strike their communication ships. We make 3 billion feel like 3 million by never letting them coordinate properly." Meanwhile, Sergeant Yunji trained combat engineers in something the galaxy didn't even have a name for: terraforming warfare, taking moons and asteroids and turning them into fortresses, setting up defensive networks that could channel enemy forces into kill zones, creating traps on a planetary scale. "The enemy has to move through space to reach us," she explained to her teams. "Space is big, but there are only so many efficient routes. We turn those routes into meat grinders. We make every kilometer they advance cost them thousands of warriors." The Galactic Council watched the human preparations with growing amazement. They offered ships, weapons, and soldiers. Some were genuine offers of help. Others were cynical moves, hoping humanity would weaken the Vryn enough that other species could claim the victory. Yuna accepted it all with diplomatic grace. She knew the truth. The other species would help, but they would help the human way, following human tactics, under human command. Because when 3 billion enemies are coming to kill you, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. In a secure communication, Admiral Jinwoo spoke with Yuna, Hana, and Doyun. Their faces filled 4 sections of his screen. "The Vryn think they're hunting us," Jinwoo said. "They think by coming to our space, they gain the advantage. But they're wrong. They're not hunting us. They're walking into a trap built by a species that spent 2 centuries trapped in a trap of our own making. We know how this works." "How long do we have?" Yuna asked. 2 months before the first fleet arrives. 3 before they're all here." Hana cracked her knuckles. "Plenty of time. We've prepared for worse odds." Doyun pulled up tactical displays. "We have 30 ships, 3,000 ground troops, and 30,000 naval personnel. They have 3 billion warriors across 3 fleets. The math doesn't look good." "The math never looks good for humans," Jinwoo replied. "We won the resource wars when we were outnumbered 20-1. We survived the Pacific conflicts when half our cities were burning. We endured the Belt rebellions when we were fighting our own children. The Vryn have numbers. We have something better." "What's that?" Yuna asked. Jinwoo's scarred face was calm. "We have experience being the underdog, and we're still here." He gave his orders. The human fleet moved out, heading toward the outer rim where the Vryn fleets would arrive. They didn't move in a grand armada like other species preferred. They split up, each ship group taking different routes, preparing different ambushes. As the last ships left Earth's orbit, Jinwoo stood at the observation window of his command station. Below, Earth rotated peacefully. Cities lit up the night side. Oceans reflected sunlight on the day side. A beautiful, peaceful world. He had fought to make it that way. They all had. And now he would fight to keep it that way. "Come on, you bastards," he whispered to the approaching Vryn. "Let's show you what humans do when you threaten our home." The first Vryn Hive fleet arrived at the edge of human space exactly on schedule. 1 billion warriors in ships made from converted biomass, organic vessels that pulsed with life. The swarm expected to find a terrified species, frantically building defenses, preparing for their inevitable defeat. Instead, they found nothing. The system the Vryn entered was empty. No ships, no stations, no defensive platforms, just empty space and a few rocky planets. The swarm's intelligence was confused. Where were the humans? Then the asteroids started shooting. Sergeant Yunji watched from her command post buried deep inside a small moon. Her teams had spent 2 months turning the entire system into a weapon. Asteroids had been hollowed out and filled with missile batteries. Comets had been redirected to create debris fields. Even the planets had surprises hidden on their surfaces. "Fire," she said calmly. Thousands of missiles launched from hidden positions. They weren't advanced weapons. They were simple, reliable rockets with conventional explosives. But there were so many of them, and they came from every direction at once. The Vryn fleet tried to adapt, firing their organic weapons at the incoming missiles. They destroyed thousands, but not enough. Explosions rippled through their formations, destroying ships and sending others spinning off course. Phase 2, Yunji ordered. The debris fields activated. What the Vryn thought were random rocks suddenly fired thrusters, accelerating into the fleet's path. Chunks of ice and stone, moving at incredible speeds, punched through organic hulls like bullets through flesh. In space, Captain Doyen's fleet waited. His 30 ships hung in the shadow of a gas giant, sensors passive, waiting for the right moment. He watched the Vryn fleet take damage, watched them try to reorganize. "They're pulling back into tight formation," his tactical officer reported, trying to present a smaller target. "Perfect," Doyen said. "That's exactly what we want. All ships, attack pattern tsunami. Hit them while they're bunched up." The human fleet struck from behind, emerging from the gas giant's shadow at full speed. They weren't trying to destroy the Vryn fleet. They were trying to drive it forward, into the next trap. The Vryn fleet accelerated to escape the human ships, pushing deeper into the system. Right into the kill zone Colonel Hana had prepared. 3 moons suddenly opened fire. Hana's ground forces had turned them into massive fortresses, armed with every weapon humanity could mount on a rocky surface. Railguns, missile batteries, energy weapons salvaged from galactic allies, even old-fashioned artillery that fired shells the size of cars. The Vryn fleet found itself caught between Doyen's ships behind them, Yunji's hidden asteroids around them, and Hana's fortress moons ahead of them. They had numbers, but numbers didn't matter when you couldn't maneuver. "Pour it on," Hana ordered. "Don't give them time to think." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the first Vryn hive fleet was scattered wreckage, billions of tons of organic matter frozen in space. The survivors fled back the way they came, their hive-mind intelligence trying to process what had happened. But the other 2 fleets were still coming. The Vryn adapted. The second fleet arrived 2 weeks later, and this time they spread out, refusing to bunch up. They sent scouts ahead, probing for traps. They moved slowly and carefully. Humanity adapted faster. Captain Doyen's fleet didn't try to herd them this time. Instead, his ships played hide-and-seek, striking from different angles, never staying in one place. They used the planets themselves as cover, swinging around gravity wells to gain speed, disappearing behind moons and reappearing where the Vryn didn't expect. "They're trying to corner us," Doyen noted, watching the Vryn fleet split into hunting groups. "Good," his tactical officer replied. "Spread them out enough and they stop being a fleet. They become targets." The human ships led the Vryn on a chase through the system, and everywhere the Vryn followed, they found surprises. Minefields that appeared to be empty space, automated weapons platforms disguised as debris, traps within traps. Colonel Hana's ground forces didn't wait on their fortified moons this time. They took the fight to Vryn-occupied asteroids, boarding them with small teams of veterans who fought through organic corridors with flamethrowers and explosives. They didn't try to hold territory. They destroyed the Vryn's ability to repair and resupply, then left before reinforcements arrived. "Asymmetric warfare," Hana explained to a confused galactic observer. "We can't match their numbers, so we don't try. We attack their logistics, make them spend resources just staying alive. Eventually, numbers don't matter if you can't feed your army." The second hive fleet lasted 2 weeks before retreating, not destroyed, but crippled, unable to sustain the losses they were taking for every kilometer they advanced. The third fleet tried something different. They bypassed the outer systems entirely, using a longer route to strike directly at Earth. A desperate gamble. If they could destroy humanity's home world, the war was over. This was the moment Admiral Jinwoo had been waiting for. The human fleet fell back to Earth, but not to hide behind its defenses. They positioned themselves between the moon and the planet, 30 ships against 500 million Vryn warriors. The galaxy watched, expecting to see humanity's last stand. Instead, they saw something else. Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship, Soul's Thunder. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency. These were people who had fought impossible battles before. One more wouldn't break them. "Open a channel to the Vryn fleet," he ordered. "All frequencies." His communication officer looked confused, but obeyed. "Channel open, sir." Jinwoo spoke, and his words were broadcast not just to his fleet, but to the Vryn hive mind itself, and to every galactic observer watching the battle. "Vryn Swarm, this is Admiral Jinwoo of Earth. You came here to eliminate humanity because you perceived us as a threat. You were right, but not for the reasons you think." He paused, looking at the feed showing the massive Vryn fleet approaching. "You fight to grow, to consume, to add other species to your collective. You fight because it's what you are." The display shifted, showing Earth behind them, blue and beautiful. "We fight to protect. We fight for our home, our families, our future. You adapt to survive. We adapt to win. Every battle you've won taught you how to fight better. Every battle we've lost taught us why we failed. Your strength is numbers. Our strength is memory." He nodded to his tactical officer. "Show them." The human fleet split apart, moving in patterns that seemed random. But they weren't random. They were bait. The Vryn fleet, confident in their numbers, pursued. That's when Earth's orbital defenses activated. Not just military satellites. Everything. Communication satellites with improvised weapons. Old space stations converted to missile platforms. Research facilities rigged to explode. Even civilian ships, piloted by volunteers, ramming Vryn vessels in kamikaze runs. And from the moon, from Mars, from hidden bases across the solar system, missiles launched, thousands upon thousands of them. Earth had spent its entire war-torn history building weapons. Now all of that terrible knowledge was put to use. The battle for Earth lasted 3 days. When it ended, the third Vryn fleet was destroyed. Not retreated. Destroyed. The debris field would orbit Earth for centuries, a reminder. On the council station, representatives watched in stunned silence as the final Vryn ship was eliminated. Ambassador Yuna stood at her station, tired but satisfied. Vector approached her, his massive form moving with unusual gentleness. "We called your species weak. We called you unfit for war. We were fools." Yuna shook her head. "No, you were right. We are weak. We're soft. We write poetry and paint pictures and cry at sad stories. We hate war. We hate violence." She looked up at him. "But we're good at it anyway. Because we had to be. Because we nearly destroyed ourselves learning how." The Galactic Council offered humanity a permanent seat on the military command, offered to learn from human tactics, offered respect and recognition. Jinwoo accepted, but with conditions. "We'll teach you how to fight, but we'll also teach you why to stop. War isn't glory. It's not honor. It's survival, and the best victory is the one where everyone goes home." Months later, Colonel Hana sat with Sergeant Yoonji and Captain Doyeon in a bar on the orbital station. They were civilians again, their military service officially over. Veterans once more. "Think we made a difference?" Yoonji asked, staring at her drink. Hana looked out the window at Earth, rotating peacefully below. "We showed them what humans can do when pushed, but more importantly, we showed them what we choose not to do when we're not." Doyeon raised his glass. "To the fallen, and to peace." They drank in silence. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous, but they'd also learned that humans were dangerous because they understood the cost of violence. They fought with everything they had, using every dirty trick and brutal tactic they knew. Not because they loved war, but because they loved peace enough to fight for it. And that made all the difference.